success. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. Take it away.
Thank you, Connor. Let me add my welcome to everyone to this 30-minute webinar on employee engagement, achieving high performance with accountability processes. And this past spring, I did a lot of speaking at conferences across the country about leadership development. And one of the questions I got many times was around employee engagement. And how do you measure employee engagement? What does it look like in our organization? And I heard a lot of people say, after the last 2 or 3 years, a lot of our employees have become disengaged from the workforce, and they're not participative in the day-to-day business operations. So how do we re-engage those? So that's kind of our message going forward today, is some tools, some techniques around how can you re-engage your workforce? What does engagement look like? How will you know when you're being successful with that? Here's some of the companies I've been working with recently, and I want to point out one of them. There in the middle, you see Manatee County Tax Collector, Ken Burton Jr. I began work with them back in 2007 when they had an issue of lack of engagement in their organization. Their employees were not connected to the business. They didn't see the day-to-day impact that they had on the success of the organization. So I worked with Ken and his staff to re-engage that workforce through some non-negotiable processes that I'll talk about. And just at the end of May, I was down in Orlando where the governor of Florida, Rick Scott, presented Ken and his team with a Sterling Award, which is the Malcolm Baldrige equivalent award for the state of Florida, recognized them as one of the top organizations in the state because of what they've done to really re-energize their workforce and re-engage them in the business. So let's talk about engagement. Typically, what we see as it relates to organizations. The first one is around employee satisfaction, and that's the belief that engaged employees are happy employees, and that's frankly a myth out there. That the belief if our employees are happy, if their happy meters are full, then they're going to be engaged employees and help with the business. That's just not true, folks. Next one we see is around employee motivation and the belief that cheerleading leads to high performance. I'll be the first to raise my hands that say absolutely. Cheerleading can engage employees. Cheerleading can get people involved. I see very many persuasive leaders out there have got dynamic personalities. But here's the reality of that. It's not sustainable. And many times the leader is traveling, or the leader actually leaves the organization, and the employees pull back. They withdraw. They lose that engagement because it was the power of the personality of the person that was driving their performance. So what do we really need to have engaged employees? We need to have systems. We've got to have a framework in place so that people know what's expected of them and then be provided with the opportunity to accomplish performance goals. I was with a company last week outside of New York City working with them, and one of the key factors they were talking about is we don't need micromanagement. We need clearly defined goals and objectives. We need clearly defined target dates, and we need the ability to go out and execute, empower us to do our job. And they wanted to, and that's one of the things I was working with them, was setting up a framework, a system, so that they can be clearly engaged within the organization. So I want to pause here, and we're going to take a brief poll. We're going to do a couple polls throughout the session today just to get a sense of our attendees, but we're going to do a poll here regarding employee engagement within your organization. All right, and just as I expected, everyone kind of views employee engagement differently within their context of their organization. But I want to talk about a couple of things that I've run across during my travels the last couple months. I found this interesting study from Towers Parent, a HR consulting company, that said highly engaged employees outperform their peers by as much as 28%. And then what's the converse of what's the business results for having unengaged employees? Low employee engagement saw average decline in operating income of more than 32%. We did a study last fall for a company that we've been working with for a while. They'd gone through some tough economic times, had really been impacted by the recession that we went through. And this is a production and manufacturing company, and they've got their teams are set up into what they call work cells. And on average, there's about 12 to 14 employees in a work cell. and we had laid out some criteria on measuring what's levels of engagement in there. And this was not a scientific study by any means, but we validated that on average, about 6 out of 12 to 13 employees were actively engaged in the business. So a little less than 50% of the workforce at that organization was actively engaged in it. And it really opened some eyes for the leadership to see how the potential was for the organization if they had actively engaged employees. And so one of the things we worked with them after that was putting in these processes, these systems to build an engaged workforce. You know, some of the struggles that I see organizations face around that is, you know, measure. How do we know if our employees are engaged? How do we measure that? You know, one way you can measure that's around your scorecards, your business results. And I'm going to share with you another way to measure the level of engagement in your organization later on using another tool. Then we're also going to talk about when you have employees, individual employees that are not engaged, how do you develop them and move forward? Another question I hear from a lot of organizations is, how can we build it into the everyday culture? How can it be something that everyone is involved with, everyone participates in? And that goes back to what I talked about before. You need to have processes. You need to have a system in place, an organizational operating system, where you have clearly defined goals and objectives, you have clearly defined target dates, clearly defined expectations, so everyone knows what's expected of them and what they need to do to help the organization be successful. And then finally around this, you know, without a system, you know, you'll never have that true employee engagement. You've got to have that. You've got to have the systems and the processes in place to back up that employee engagement. So you got to elevate the expectations within everyone in the organization. So I want to pause here. We'll do another poll for us. Connor will open that up and take another poll around employee engagement. So the results of the employee engagement were around, majority of the folks said poor to good was where they would rank in employee engagement. That's probably one of the reasons why you've joined us today. So, well, I want to just kind of transition and start building. How do we start putting in place this engagement process? And I want to share with you a tool. It's called an action register. It's a tool that my organization has found to be very beneficial in several ways for an organization to engage their employees. And this tool, first one thing it does, it brings visibility for both the employee and the leader. And I have learned in the 15 years that I've been doing this that employees absolutely love the concept of accountability, because not only are they being held accountable, but for the first time through the action register, their leaders are being held accountable, because the leaders' commitments and dates are now being published. So as an employee, if I got my commitments and dates visible to everyone on my team, so doesn't my leader have that as well. It eliminates ignorance as an excuse. And many times I'm in an organization, or I'll be sitting in a meeting, auditing a meeting for meeting efficiency, and I'll hear people say, well, I didn't know that. No one told me. And they use ignorance as an excuse to get out of accountability, because what the organization has failed to do is to document critical assignments and tasks that have been assigned to the employees, or that the employees have volunteered for. Non-utilization is, it breaks the cycle of tasks not being completed. And how many times have you been sitting in a meeting and you're sitting there thinking to yourself, you know, we talked about this last week, and last week Michael said he was going to do this, and Karen said she was going to do this, and here it is a week later, 2 weeks later, and for the third, fourth time, you're talking about the same thing over and over again, because you're failing to capture things getting done. Or the old, I see it a lot of times in organizations, the drive-bys, the hit-and-runs, where you're walking down the hall and somebody asks you to do something, and 5 seconds later you've totally forgotten about it, and they've forgotten about it, because you failed to capture what it is that you need to do, or that they need to do. And quite frankly, many times people have that belief, you know what, I know that my manager is not going to follow up on this action, so why should I follow through on it? So it helps us break that. And then finally around this, it drives collective engagement. And what I mean by that is it gets everyone on the same page in terms of workload, work tasks that need to happen, that need to be done. And in a few minutes, I'm going to show you how can you measure that engagement within your team. So I've talked to you about an action register. What does an action register look like? It's an accountability tool designed to document critical tasks, ownership responsibilities, and target dates. And in that first column, you put down what's the action, what someone must do. And when you hear terms such as someone should, I will, let's do this, those are action terms. We need to document what people say they're going to do. And my rule of thumb is I don't care if it takes a half a page. I want that action to be as specific as possible. So I could go back a year from now and know exactly what that action was related to in our business. The owner, the person that's required to get this done on time. My rule is you cannot assign an action to someone unless they're physically present in that meeting. So we're not going to give all the actions to Nick because Nick's out sick today. Nick may be the subject matter expert. He may be the one with the best skill set to get it done. So we'll put Nick's name down. We're going to also assign that accountability to John, and John is just as accountable to Nick to make sure that action gets done on time. The target date. There are some actions that are going to take 10 minutes, which will have a target date of a week from now, and there are other actions that will have a much larger scope. Maybe it's rewriting a policy or developing a new process. That's 3 months from now. The key is we've got to have a defined target date when we expect that action to be done. And when that action is not done on time, we've got a defined process in place so that we don't lose that original target date, that we're capturing how many times that action has been renegotiated and the target date is pushed out. The completion date. When was this action completed by? Was it completed by the completion date, or was it after the fact? Because that's going to be another thing that's going to bring visibility to accountability. And then finally, the comments field. What happened? Why was that action not completed on time? Or potentially maybe it was, you know what, hey, I didn't get it done because I was waiting on a supplier to get back to me. I was waiting on a customer to get back to me, or someone internal to get back to me. So let's document about what goes on with each of those actions so that we understand what happens within our business. I want to show you a screenshot of an action register. This is from an actual company that we work with, and this is some software that we have called PBL Scorecard. But it gives you a quick view of what does an action register look like. And you'll see in the first column the action. What does it apply to? Does it apply to the team, or does it apply to a specific metric? And I'll speak to you in a few minutes about that. And then you'll see it's color-coded. And Manatee County, who I referenced earlier, utilizing this. Pfizer, I was working with them back in May. They utilized this software as a way to bring visibility to what's important within their organization. So let's talk about the action register and what are some of the benefits that we can use around the action register. One, meeting effectiveness. I touched on that earlier of capturing what people say they're going to do within a meeting. And I have learned people do not mind going to meetings if something gets done. But many times we walk into a meeting expecting it to be bad because we know the history around that meeting that things just aren't getting done. Scorecard effectiveness. I'm going to speak more about this in a few minutes, but really many organizations, they measure, but they fail to take it to the next level. And I'm going to show you how this action register, this accountability process can help you take your scorecards to the next level within your organization. Employee empowerment. I've got a tool that I picked up from a company I've worked with. I'm going to show you how you can drive that employee empowerment in your organization. And then finally, performance management. You know, many times when it comes time to do performance reviews, we sit down 2 weeks prior to the anniversary date of that performance review, and that's the data we're going off of. We're not looking at the body of work of the last year. I'm going to share with you how can you utilize this action register, this accountability process, to really look at the entire year that someone's worked within your organization. So let's talk about meeting effectiveness and how this tool, the action register, how it can drive to more effective meetings. We're going to reduce time spent in our meetings because we're not going to have to talk about something over and over again. We'll talk about it one time. And we'll talk about it one time, and we'll say, what's the action here? An action will come out of that meeting. We'll capture that action, and then we will document it on the action register, and then we'll review at the next meeting and get the answers. What was the result of that action? I've said it several times. I don't need to harbor this point, but it eliminates discussing that topic at the same time. We're only going to talk about it once. We won't have to talk about it for the next 3 weeks before we finally take action. We talk about it once. Captures what people say they're going to do. Each meeting, you need to have someone on your team that's designated as the action keeper, that when you hear terms such as I will, someone should, let's do this, they capture that action, and then at the end of the meeting, They review all the actions that came out of that meeting. And one of the things that I do when I do these meeting audits is I listen for actions. And typically there's 6 or 7 actions that are discussed in the meeting, but most times people fail to capture them. It helps us follow through on assigned action, so it brings visibility to what are the things that Randy needs to do during the week and the things that Connor needs to do during the week, so that when we come back together the following week, we know we've completed what we've got to do to help the organization be successful. And then another point around the action register, you need to look at it at the start of the meeting to go over the actions that were due that day, and then you need to review it at the end of the meeting. And as I said just a minute, to review what people need to do. This is where we're going to start engaging our workforce by assigning critical actions and tasks to them, and we're going to document it so that people can no longer hide within the organization. There's visibility to things that people need to do. And I've seen an interesting phenomenon, of human nature, is that the first several times an organization utilizes an action register and people see that this accountability is real, it's visible, it's auditable, people may show up for the meetings the first couple times not completing their actions done on time, but then they start to see their peers completing the actions done on time, so then peer pressure develops. And Kathy says, well, I can see that this is real, so I probably need to get my action done. And Kathy will run out of that meeting to get her action done. So next, utilization of the scorecard or the action register is around our scorecards. And I mentioned it before that many organizations measure them, but they fail to take it to the next level. We need to look at our scorecards not as thermometers that just tells us the temperature, but we need to look at our scorecards as thermostats, in that it tells us the temperature if we're winning or we're losing. And if we're losing, every metric on our scorecard that is red must have a corrective action plan in place. And what this does is it creates the ownership, the buy-in, and engages the team, the workforce around, hey, we were red on quality last week. Let's talk about why we're red and what are we going to do about it. And then that corrective action plan, it gets elevated up within the organization so that middle managers, upper managers, senior management can see, hey, this team, they've got their business in control because they've verified that they're red and they've come up with a plan of what they're going to do differently as a result of it. And it creates that ownership and that buy-in, because instead of my manager or a manager's manager telling us what to do, we're the ones closest to the business. We're coming up, and I say our team's coming up with, we're diagnosing the issues and we're putting together a plan that we're going to do to drive that metric to positive result, drives a continuous improvement mindset. Red is not bad on a scorecard. Red is the opportunity to get better. And I work with a company, they celebrate when they get red because they know, hey, if we're red, we can only get better. So it drives that continuous improvement mindset within the organization. I want to show you this next slide that really ties the linkage between a metric that is red and a corrective action for it. So you'll see here's a scorecard. This is a scorecard from a company we've worked with. Here's what they're measuring around quality. Here's their action registers associated with. So you'll see they got a supplier issue. What's the action associated with that? They've got a shipping issue. What's the action associated with that? So what are we doing about it, and who's accountable to making sure it gets done? So it's a very powerful tool for organizations to move their scorecards from thermometers over to thermostats. So I want to pause here. Connor's going to launch another poll around employee engagement. It'll be our final one of the day. Okay, and that one, a lot of answers to what people do when an employee gets disengaged. And I want to share with you a tool that that a company we were working with came up with. It's called the Personal Action Register. What this Personal Action Register does is really it takes lack of engagement down to the employee, down to the personal level, and allows someone to to re-engage them. You'll see what the action is. The R in there, that column is responsibility. The T's for the target date, and then the C, when was it completed by. And so what it does is it empowers employees to solve their own issues. So many times employees come to the leaders with an issue, with an item, and they expect their manager to get it done on time. And I've see it all the time where employees will say to the managers, hey, how much vacation do I have left? Or, hey, my paycheck was wrong. I didn't get paid enough money for overtime. And the leader, the manager, will take on that item and solve that issue for the employee. That employee is capable of solving that themselves. So what they do is they put that action on that action register and say, hey, I want you, they empower the employee, they solve their issue, and they say, hey, I want you to go down to HR, and I want you to talk to Ron in HR and ask Ron how much vacation you have left, or ask Ron how to get that done. And the employee gets a copy of that action register. The manager's got a duplicate copy, and so the manager knows when I need to follow back in, follow up. It reduces the leader's need to be involved. And so instead of the leader running around doing administrative tasks for his or her team, he's empowering, he's engaging that employee to go out and solve that issue themselves. And it breaks that cycle of dependency I see so many times on the leader, where the leader's viewed as, hey, my leader's there to help me do things. So let's talk about our final piece around the action register and the accountability process. And what can the action register do for us? It can provide us an accountability analysis of who's engaged and who's participative in the organizations. And then what it frankly does is it provides data for meaningful performance review discussions. And I remember my first job here in Atlanta, Georgia. I was 22 years old. I'd been working for this company for about 8 months, and I was given a performance review. And I got a lot of pushback from that employee because I didn't have the data that backed up what I was speaking to. And I remember, I'll never forget, I said, you're not a team player. And they said, prove it to me. I didn't have the data to prove they weren't a team player. But by utilizing this tool here that I'm going to share with you called the accountability analysis, I've taken a copy of our action register from the last 60 days, and I've gone through and I said, how many actions has each of my employees taken and how many have they completed on time? And right away, there's a couple of things that as a leader I can see. One, I'm managing by personality. What I mean by managing by personality is this. I've got Shane and I've got Gwen and I've got Linda, who are my go-to people. They're the people that I go to every time I need something done. Pretty soon they're going to get tired, they're going to get frustrated, they're going to get burned out, and they're going to leave me. And then look at Anna and Patricia and John. They're not engaged, they're not participative because over the last 60 days they haven't volunteered for an action, they haven't been assigned an action, they've done nothing, in my opinion, to help advance our business forward. And this has created a lot of frustration among our team because Shane and Gwen and Linda are saying we make basically the same amount of money as Anna and John, and we're working 9, 10 hours a day, and they're not really doing anything. Where's the equity in that? So by putting this up, a couple of things will happen. One, your team is going to immediately know who everyone is on there. You don't even have to put the names up there. People are going to say, well, that's Shane, that's Anna, that's probably Adam. They're going to know. And what's going to happen here is a couple things. Anna and Patricia and John, they're going to say to themselves, well, I either need to get engaged and become actively involved within my team, or else I'm either going to start going through a progressive discipline process, or I will probably need to think about moving on within my organization. The accountability analysis brings visibility to who's engaged and who's participative. And this is a very powerful tool, and I've seen a lot of people turn the corner when they start seeing how real accountability can be and how they need to start becoming engaged within the organization. So it's a very powerful tool, and it's good for the leaders as well because it helps the leaders to see, am I doing a good job in terms of engaging my workforce? So what does the accountability process give you? It helps you build trust. Actions equal words. And not only does it build trust within your team, of team member to team member, but it builds trust that, hey, as an employee, I can trust my manager to follow through on things because it gets put on the action register, and he or she follows through by the assigned date to get it done. Visibility is brought to commitments and promises for both the team and the leader within the organization, and then it provides the ability to demonstrate follow-up and follow through that leaders have listened, they've responded, and they've communicated appropriately regarding an issue with that. It helps minimize emotionalism. It takes that out of the equation because it keeps the focus on the business. It doesn't become a personality-based tool. It becomes a tool where we're process-based, and we're looking at what do we need to do for our business to help us be successful. And then the final thing around employee engagement, expectations clarified. Everyone is on the same page. Let me conclude by just stating I've seen a lot of organizations that have, over the past years, have suffered from a lack of engagement. They want to re-engage their employees. This tool that I've shared with you over our past 25 minutes together, the Action Register, it helps bring visibility to what's important. It helps engage employees because now we can assign specific actions, tasks to employees with predefined target dates in hopes that they hit those target dates. And then the accountability analysis will show us, hey, of my team of 8, 9, 10 people, who's contributing to the overall success of the business? I want to conclude right now. And Connor, we've got a couple minutes left. Just want to see if any questions came in during our time together.
Absolutely. Excellent job, Seth. Thanks for delivering this session today. We had a lot of different questions. One excellent question I saw a couple of times was about the accountability analysis chart that you showed, and people wanted to know if you could go into more detail on how you come up with the value scores for those, you know, the 1, 2, and 3 values.
Right. Yeah, that piece, in my opinion, that's purely subjective. I'm giving a value of a 3 on an action if it's something that's strategic in scope, that's going to require some effort, that's going to bring value to the business. As I mentioned before, maybe it's writing a new policy, developing a new process, or a new product. That's much larger, much more important to the business, whereas a 1 is an action that, you know, frankly may take 30 minutes to an hour complete. Maybe it's picking the phone up and making one or 2 phone calls to that. So that's the subjective piece, but it does help to bring visibility to the different things that people are working on within the business. One more, Connor?
Yeah, there were a few questions about the personal action register. I guess people, they were asking, you know, where can they get a copy of something like that?
Certainly, if you want a copy of one of those, I'd be more than happy to send one out to you. We've got a box in our storeroom here of personal action registers that we send out to people. You know, I will caution people that the personal action register, it's a very powerful tool, but you need to have some framework and some context behind that people understand what the utilization of that action register is. That it's not meant to be a punitive tool. It's meant more to empower our employees to solve issues themselves, as opposed to depending upon the leader to be the person to solve that issue. So I want to thank everyone for their time today and their attention. I hope this has been valuable and beneficial for you. I'm going to turn it back over to Connor. Connor's going to spend about a minute just wrapping things up. Thank you, everybody.
Well, absolutely. Seth, if you could go to the final slide there just to recap. Of course, we do these webinars every month on a variety of topics. Every week we come out with a Tuesday tip by email, through LinkedIn, Twitter, you name it. Next month's webinar is on communication and how to improve the effectiveness and efficiencies with your meetings. We have a special guest, Charlie Redmond. He's on the senior leadership team of BAE Systems in Anniston, Alabama, and he'll be joining us and making some comments and drawing the connection with what we'll be teaching to how it works in real life. We also have public workshops every few months. The next one that we've got is in the New York City area at Pfizer, September 20th and 21st. That'll be on process-based leadership and go into a lot more detail for you than what you could see in a 30-minute webinar. And then they take us on an excellent behind-the-scenes tour to really show you how it all works in action. If you have any additional questions, need any more information, please hit processbasedleadership.com and we'll be glad to help you out. Again, thanks a lot for joining us, and we'll see you next month. Take care.